Okay. All right, so lymphatic and immune system. Okay, so we'll start with the lymphatic system. It has three main functions, okay, fluid balance, fat absorption, and defense. Okay, the fluid balance part is to not allow edema to take place. Okay, so edema is swelling in the body. Okay, now if you get hurt, that's different. Okay, like for example, if you sprain your ankle, I mean, it's going to be expected that the ankle is going to swell, so you're going to get some edema. Okay, outside of injury, the body should not really be swelling. You shouldn't really have edema because your lymphatic system is there to collect the fluid. Okay, so if all of this about 30 liters of fluid that passes from the blood to the capillaries to the interstitial areas each day. Okay, if you know, so this is what your body does with the fluid. So we've got all this fluid that circulates throughout the body. Okay, some of it does leak out. All right, about 3 liters does leak out. And when that happens, your lymphatic capillaries, okay, the lymphatic system, absorb it kind of like a sponge. It absorbs it and gets it back into the tubes. All right, your tubes being the lymphatic tubes, your arteries, and your veins. So it gets it back into the system. So that as a result, you do not get edema. Now, some people, non-traumatic, will get edema, like diabetics risk getting edema. People with pulmonary disease and some other issues can certainly start to get swelling in their body that's non-traumatic because they're dealing with some sort of pathology. But when things are working normal, your body collects the edema, the fluid that would otherwise leak out, and the lymphatics get it right back into the system. Okay, lymphatic fluid is derived from two sources. Okay, the substances found in the plasma, which is part of the blood, and substances derived from the cells, such as hormones, enzymes, and waste products. Okay, the things you find in plasma are ions, so those are positive and negative charged ions, nutrients, gases, and proteins. Okay, the second function, and this is in no particular order, but the second function is fat absorption. So when you eat, especially when you eat fat, your body goes through a complicated process of how it's supposed to break down the fat. And your lymphatic system is part of that. Okay, so the lymphatics will absorb fat and other substances from the digestive tract. And then the third function of the lymphatic system is defense. Now, most people recognize this part, you know, that your lymphatic system is part of your immune system. So it is part of defense, and it will help you destroy microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, cancer cells, and any antigen. Okay, now an antigen is a bad guy. Okay, so any antigen in your body is simply considered a bad guy, and that can be bacteria, viruses, and whatever. Anything that doesn't belong there is an antigen. So the lymphatic system has tubes, okay, that we'll call lymphatic vessels. All right, the tubes behave similar to like your veins. Okay, they transport the fluid that have escaped from the blood and they bring it back into your system. Okay, we also have lymphatic organs like your tonsils, okay, your adenoids. Okay, these organs house phagocytes, which are a type of Pac-Man. Okay, that's just my kind of fun term for it, right? So Pac-Man's job is to eat things. So we have a bunch of different Pac-Mans in our body. And because Pac-Man eats stuff, okay, they're called a phagocyte. So your lymphatic system has phagocytes in them, which helps play an essential role in your immune system. Okay, your body's defense and resistance to disease. Okay, if you do end up getting too much edema or swelling, you can impair tissue. Okay, so too much swelling over a long period of time is not good for tissue. Okay, so once the fluid escapes the blood, gets into the space, and then your fluid vessels collected, at this point it is called lymph. Okay, eventually it does get returned back to the bloodstream. Okay, the lymphatic vessels, all right, so you can look at these as a tube, very similar to a vein. Okay, fluid flows through the tube. And the lymphatic system, these tubes work their way from the body back to the heart. Okay, so these lymphatic capillaries, you've got a lot of them. They absorb the leaky fluid. They have one-way valves in them to continue the fluid route toward the heart so that there's no backflow. Okay, that's the point of one-way valves, no backflow. The nodes that you find, so you'll have a tube and then a whole bunch of lymph nodes and then more tubes and then some lymph nodes and more tubes, okay, and a lymph node, like bunches of them. So as the fluid is traveling through and it gets inside the lymph node, the antigens, the bad guys, are attacked over and over again as it works its way back toward the heart. Okay, this happens within those nodes, and there's a lot of Pac-Mans that are inside of the lymph nodes, and they just keep going to work. They keep eating away at the antigens. So if this is poorly functioning in a person, these opportunistic organisms, which means organisms that can hurt you, will eventually start to win. Okay, they pass into the bloodstream, they can get into different parts of your body and start to wreak havoc. All right, so this is a simple animation of how it works. Okay, so from the heart pumps blood to your body. Now at some point that tapers into the vein system, and the vein system will send blood back to the heart. Okay, some of that fluid leaks out, and your all these green tubes here, okay, that's the capillaries, or the lymphatic capillaries, the lymphatic vessels, and they collect that fluid and as it goes from node to node and all that kind of thing, all the way back to the heart. The fluid is being purified, and you're destroying the bad guys. And then eventually it gets put back into the vein system, into circulation, which goes back into the heart to be pumped out again. Okay, so this constantly is cycling throughout your body. Okay, we already mentioned this about the lymph nodes helping remove the antigens. We have clusters of lymph nodes, the cervical, axillary, and inguinal. Now, lymph nodes, for the most part, are all over the body, but we have an unusual high cluster of them in certain areas. So you find a high amount of them in the neck. So those are the cervical lymph nodes. In the armpit area, those are the axillary lymph nodes. And in the inguinal area, okay, a bunch of lymph nodes there, cluster of them. Okay, you'll also notice on this anatomical man that we have, it's green and kind of a peach color, okay? So the green area, okay, all this green stuff, that is where the right thoracic duct, okay, the right lymphatic duct, so that green area of the body, that's responsible for filtering. So those particular blood vessels are responsible for filtering just that area, okay? And it happens to drain into the right lymphatic duct, which is right here. So the lymph vessels eventually spill into the vein, the right lymphatic duct, and that's the area that's responsible. Now the rest of the body is all that peach color stuff that's colored there, and that goes into the thoracic duct, into the left subclavian vein. Okay, so the left side is what filters and processes the majority of the body. So we have a right lymphatic duct and a left lymphatic duct. The right side only does, looks like a quarter of you, and the rest of the body on the left side is filtered by the thoracic duct on the left. Okay, macrophages are a very specific type of Pac-Man. Okay, so within the lymph nodes, you find these macrophages. They destroy bacteria, viruses, and other foreign substances. And the word that we use to cover all that is an antigen. Okay, you also find lymphocytes here. Lymphocytes are another type of Pac-Man that eat the bad guys. Other lymph organs, spleen is considered a lymph organ. Some of its function is to filter blood of bacteria, viruses, and other debris. It destroys worn out red blood cells. It stores platelets. It's also a blood reservoir. So if you lose blood, your body will, your spleen will donate its blood to get your blood volume back up. Okay, the thymus is considered a lymph organ, and it plays a role in activating part of your immune system, and it does it through this hormone called thymosin. So the thymus releases thymosin, and thymosin activates part of your immune system. So this is a very important process, and it's very active during youth. So as you get older, the thymosin and all that naturally declines over time. Okay, your tonsils are considered lymph tissue found in the throat area. It traps antigens and removes them, such as bacteria, viruses, and so on, anything that doesn't belong there. Peyer's patches are your lymph node type things found in the small intestine area. Okay, and their job is to destroy the antigens. Inside of a lymph node, this is what it looks like. You've got fluid that's coming in, and keep in mind, the fluid can only go in one direction, and it works from like a vein. It goes back to the heart, so it goes from body to heart. Okay, all the fluid goes from body to heart. Okay, once it gets inside, once the fluid gets inside, it's got a lot of surface area in here. So there's increased surface area to give the Pac-Mans, all the different Pac-Mans that we find inside of the lymph node, give it time to destroy the antigens. All right, you can see the one-way valves. Okay, there's a one-way valve, and there's a one-way valve. Okay, so there's a lot of one-way valves throughout the length of the entire tube as it's working its way to the heart, and in each lymph node as it's working its way to the heart. Okay, here's the Peyer's patches. Okay, cluster of lymph nodes in the small intestine. There's the thymus. It's located around the heart area. Okay, and there's the tonsils found in the back of the throat. And there's the spleen in the upper left quadrant. Okay, other parts of our immune system. Bottom line, immunity is defense. We have three basic lines of defense. Okay, the easy version, first line, second line, third line of defense, but they have AKAs. The first line is also known as innate resistance. Second line is the inflammatory response. And the third line is adaptive immunity, also known as acquired immunity, also known as third line of defense. So that one actually has three AKAs: adaptive, acquired, third line of defense. Okay, the first line of defense, which is innate immunity. Okay, first line or innate immunity. Now this is, the way you can look at this is the stuff you're born with. Okay, you're born with skin. You're born with the ability to slough off cells, to cough and sneeze, to flush things out, to vomit. You have mucus, you have cilia. Okay, so the first line is just stuff you're born with. All right, so your skin, for example, has sebaceous glands, which are the oil glands that secrete antibacteria and antifungal fatty acids and lactic acid. Okay, your ability to sweat or perspiration, your tears, saliva, contain an enzyme called a lysosome that attacks the cell wall of gram-positive bacteria. The skin is also acidic, about pH of 3 to 5, making it an unsuitable host for most bacteria. Okay, if an antigen gets past your skin, then your body tries to eliminate it through mechanical clearance, like the ability to vomit, to cough, to sneeze, to flush. Okay, your body also needs a healthy balance of good bacteria and good microflora. Okay, imbalances in the good bacteria will create problems. Okay, the good bacteria or the good microflora produce chemicals that inhibit the growth of some invading bacteria. Okay, so that's if a person is on antibiotics or undergoes antibiotic therapy, then this starts to deplete the good bacteria. Of course, it's going to knock out the bad bacteria as well. I mean, that's the point of taking antibiotics, but as a side effect, you're also going to get rid of the good bacteria, and it is important that you replace the good bacteria. So you would take a probiotic. Okay, when this, so if the first line of defense no longer can work for you, then the second line of defense comes in, that's the inflammatory response. So inflammation can cause a fever, can cause these things called interferons to come in. Okay, an interferon is a type of cytokine, which is a type of you can look at it as a type of Pac-Man. And they regulate the intensity and the duration of the immune response. So how hard and how long the Pac-Mans are going to do their job. Okay, an interferon helps inhibit certain viruses. Okay, your T cells also help fight viral infections. So all these different Pac-Mans know to come in because of the inflammation. So in other words, you get an inflammatory response. The inflammation sends out a signal. Your nearby floating Pac-Mans go, oh, I picked up on that signal, so they rush into the site to start to destroy the antigen. Okay. So in other words, what started all this was the presence of an antigen. Okay, so a bad guy shows up. The bad guy sends out its own signal called, it's a chemotaxis type thing, which creates inflammation. Inflammation sends out a signal to your body to bring in a bunch of Pac-Mans so they can start kicking butt. Okay, that's the inflammatory response. Okay, another part of the second line is complement. So you can kind of look at it as another type of Pac-Man that helps destroy bacteria. Lysosomes, another type of Pac-Man, which is an enzyme that helps destroy bacteria. IgA, so immunoglobulin A, found in tears and colostrum, destroy antigens. Phagocytes, like your neutrophils, eosinophils, monocytes, macrophages, destroy antigens. And then help from the spleen, liver, bone marrow, and alveoli, which that's in your lungs. The alveoli they have what's called dust cells. It's a type of Pac-Man. Okay, so the goal of inflammation is to limit and control the inflammatory process. So in other words, here's your arm. Okay, so the skin to your arm. A bee comes in and stings you, introducing venom into your body. You want your body to swell. You want the inflammation to come in to wall off the venom. So it's limiting the amount of damage that venom can do and is trying to control it. Okay, and this is in healthy situations. I'm not talking about anaphylactic stuff if you're allergic. That's a whole different ballgame. Okay, or here's another one. If you are breathing, so there's your nose, okay? So there's all these airborne particles, cat dander, pollen, whatever, ragweed, and you inhale it. Well, some people are allergic to that stuff, so now you have the presence of these bad guys activating inflammation to prevent and limit infection and further damage. Okay, so in the allergy airborne thing, you're going to get first line and second line. So you're going to get the coughing, sneezing, and all that, the tearing, the snotting, and the built-in Pac-Mans are going to come in to start to destroy the bad guys. Okay, third line of defense is also known as acquired or adaptive immunity. This is where your body learns over time how to create a defense against the bad guys, against the antigens. Okay, so let me give you this very simple analogy here, a very simple scenario. If you have a newborn, okay, so 2 days old, and you have an adult, let's just say the adult is 40, okay, this 2-day-old infant and the 40-year-old adult, well, this 40-year-old has been alive a long time to learn over time how to fight the bad guys. So let's say virus number 1, and I'm making this number up, but let's just say virus number 1, which is your common cold virus, comes into the room. Okay, so virus number 1 comes into the room and gets in the 4-year-old and gets in the 2-month-old or the 2-day-old. Well, it wouldn't matter, 2 day or 2 months. Point is, it's young, it's an infant. Okay, the 4-year-old has seen virus number 1 a bunch. So in other words, they've had a cold in the past many times, they've learned how to fight it, so virus number 1 is not even going to do anything to this person. But the 2-day-old has never seen it before, so they're going to be symptomatic. So the virus gets in, creates symptoms in the infant, so they're going to have typical, cold virus symptoms, which is like runny nose, coughing, that kind of thing. Maybe a little bit of a fever. But what happens is the body learns how to fight it. So after the symptoms are done, let's just say it's 2 weeks, okay? And after you're over it, and now you're better, your body stores that as memory, okay? So it stores this as memory in your immune system. So when virus number 1 comes in, you already have seen it, so it's not going to do anything to you because of your acquired immune system, your adaptive immune system. You learned how to fight this over time, okay? So in general, that's why your adults are likely more resistant to certain things than a child. Because the younger you are, you just have not been alive long enough to be exposed to, all the different things that are out there. But your body's learning, okay? This is one way to build an immune system, is to be out and about, play in the dirt, get on the playground, get around other kids, do stuff. Like literally be a kid. That thymosin hormone that we talked about earlier that comes from the thymus gland, it's very active during youth. This is the best time for you to build your immune system. If you don't, and you try to do this as an adult, you're basically screwed. You're way behind the curve and you're not going to do very well. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean be irresponsible, like don't let kids drink Drano and, oh, you're a kid, so let's just expose you to as many harmful toxins as possible. I mean, there's going to be some common sense stuff, with your kids. You don't want them to actually consume poisons and things like that, thinking it's going to build their immune system. I'm talking about, everyday normal activities like playing outside, being in the dirt, being around other kids, like that's fine. Sure, things are going to happen. It's impossible to never be sick your entire life. Okay, so as long as things are kind of within normal, within normal dynamics of human interaction, like it's fine. Okay. Okay, so your body is always under a constant challenge. And I mean 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, your body is constantly under an immune challenge. Okay, so your body is always seeking out antigens to destroy. Viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites, pollen, allergies to food, bee venom, drugs, vaccines, transfusions, transplanted tissues, and so on. Okay, airborne pollutants and particles, bad stuff that you might find in foods or water. Okay, your body is constantly undergoing an immune challenge. But overall, we're designed to handle it. Okay, now obviously, opportunistic organisms can be stronger than you. You can die from viruses. You can die from bacterial infections. You can die from poisons. Okay, but there is, kind of this line. Okay, and we'll just call that the midline. So if you're on this end of the line, you're going to be just fine. You'll fight everything off just fine. But sometimes those opportunistic organisms get too strong. Okay, and the longer you let that go, the longer the infection goes, and the stronger the bacteria or virus or whatever it is, it can really hurt you or kill you. Okay, so in other words, our body is good at fighting a lot of things, but there's obviously some stuff out there that can hurt you and or kill you. Okay. Okay, so this is just showing you first line of defense, your mechanical barriers such as skin. Second line of defense, which is inflammation. Inflammation brings in more Pac-Mans to destroy things. Third line of defense is a very specific response, usually involving antibodies and T cells. So these are very fancy Pac-Mans that come in to destroy the bacteria or antigen. Okay, leukocytes are your white blood cells. Okay, they are a type of Pac-Man involved in the immune response. A very important line of defense. These are basically the front lines people. So these are your ground troops that go in first. Okay, your body creates the myeloid version of your white blood cells and the lymphoid version. Okay, and this comes from the bone marrow. So these stem cells are found in the bone marrow, and when they're given a signal, it will differentiate into myeloids and lymphoids. The myeloids give rise to your neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, and your lymphoids gives rise to the B cells and the T cells. Okay, your B cells and your T cells are very, very strong and potent types of Pac-Mans. Okay, the B cells release antibodies. So there's a B cell, has an antibody on it. The antibody is released, and it's a Y-shaped protein that floats around in your system and finds the bad guy, okay, the antigen, and it will destroy it. They bind to it and eventually destroy the bad guy. Okay, so your B cells release your antibodies. The T cells, okay, they do it by attacking the bad guy directly. Okay, so here's your antigen. All right, a T cell comes in, and instead of releasing an antibody like the B cell does, the T cell directly attacks the antibody, releasing a substance called perforin, which is a chemical that breaks down and destroys the antigen. Okay, once this happens, okay, you start to develop what's called a memory cell. Okay, right there, a memory cell. So that's why your first exposure sucks, but then your exposures thereafter to the same antigen, your body will fight it very quickly. Okay, things that can affect your immune system. So trauma, disease, pollution, radiation, UV light, drugs, inadequate sleep, poor diet and lifestyle, age, gender, and genetic background are all factors that will influence your immune system. Okay, so let's just say a person's lucky and they're born with, genetically pretty good. They've had a pretty healthy lifestyle, clean foods, meaning, not artificial, not fake, not too much sugar, all that stuff. Okay, just a very clean, a very good diet. They've had the basics of exercise, plenty of sleep, good genetics. They're likely going to be ahead of the curve and do very well fighting off diseases, fighting off antigens, fighting off bad guys. Okay, but let's say you have a person, that's born and genetically they're behind the curve because of family history of obesity and diabetes and family history of cancer. So there's your genetic component. And they grew up with poor diet, poor lifestyle, poor eating habits. They're just going to be behind the curve. Okay, so and then they may also be on a lot of medication. They may also be on some other forms of drugs. There's always side effects to drugs, legal and illegal. And then, just as time goes by, they are kind of behind the curve. So they have pre-existing conditions, comorbidity things, and so forth. And so therefore, they're more susceptible to getting sick. Okay, so there's just things that affect the immune system. Now, irrespective of where you are on the spectrum, genetically good, maybe a little bit behind genetically, maybe overweight, maybe not, sedentary, active, it's never too late to build your immune system. So it doesn't matter where you are on the scale, on the spectrum, it's never too late to build your immune system, to work on it, okay? On paper, it's very easy. Stay away from pro-inflammatory foods, stick with good foods, take certain specialty immune supplements and immune boosting techniques, minimize your stress, basics of exercise, and you'll do wonderful. Okay, sometimes the immune response works against the person, like for example, an organ transplant. So if you get an organ from another person, your body is going to try to reject that organ. Okay, so sometimes your immune system can work against you. Allergies tends to be an overreaction of the immune system, a hypersensitivity. Okay, so that's your immune system kind of spinning out of control. It's working way too hard. Okay, natural immunity is the immune system that attains its own immunity on its own, present at birth. Okay, mom does play a role in this. So during pregnancy, what mom eats, what mom drinks, stress, no stress, exercise, all that stuff does play a role in the development of that child's immune system. Okay, the acquired immunity is the immune system that you gain after birth. That's the third line we've been talking about. Okay, humoral immunity. Now, when you see the word humoral, think fluid, like blood, body fluid. So in other words, when there's when there's Pac-Mans inside of fluid, that's called humoral immunity. Okay, so these are circulating antibodies. And we said earlier, an antibody is a Y-shaped protein. So as these are circulating in your body, that's called humoral immunity. Humoral meaning fluid. So anytime you have antibodies suspended in fluid, that's called humoral. And those are your B cells. Okay. And the B cells come from your bone marrow. That's where they are created. And then they're released into your body and they circulate. And when that B cell releases, so it's got an antibody attached to it, it can release it. Now you have these circulating antibodies and they'll bind the bad guy and destroy it. Okay, so this one is saying that the B cells come from the bone marrow, and then once they get into your body, you get into fluids such as your tears, saliva, breast milk, which is colostrum, the blood itself, and so on. That's humoral immunity. Okay, T cells are also created in the bone marrow, and they are released. All right, so T cells are released from bone marrow, and they go to the thymus. Okay, where they are matured by that hormone thymosin, and then they're released into your body, and then they do their job, their Pac-Man type job. Okay, this is the one where it goes up to the antigen, okay, the T cell, and basically releases its chemicals to destroy the antigen. So that is direct attack on the antigen. Okay, the B cell releases its antigen, its antigen. Okay, that's called cell-mediated immunity. Okay, so cell-mediated immunity are your T cells, and humoral is your B cells. Okay, here it's showing the bone marrow. And this is where those Pac-Mans come from, your B cells and T cells and white blood cells. And then there's the thymus that releases the hormone thymosin, which activates the T cells, matures them. Okay, if the bone marrow starts to spit out a bunch of immature white blood cells, and those white blood cells cannot carry out their protective function, now you're dealing with leukemia. Okay, so leukemia is a bone marrow cancer, and it basically spits out all these white blood cells that are useless. They don't do anything, and it spits out a ton of them. And so when you go to get a, first of all, you're going to feel like crap. It feels like the worst case of the flu you've ever had. You just feel awful. And then what eventually happens is when the person realizes this isn't going away, they go in. And there's a very good chance they're going to do blood work, and they'll do a CBC, and it'll come back, which CBC stands for complete blood count. So they'll basically take your blood and measure it. And your white blood cells will be very high, and they will be immature. And when they see that, they go, oh, this usually indicates leukemia. So if they suspect that, then they would refer you to oncology, cancer people, cancer specialists, and then they would take over and do fancier testing and and figure it out, and then tell you what kind of leukemia you have, and then the kind of treatments to go from there. Okay, here is your bone marrow, which has stem cells that will make your T cells and B cells, and eventually they get into your body and float around. Okay, the antigens are the bad guys. Your body is able to detect these bad guys and send in the Pac-Mans to destroy them. Okay, some of those Pac-Mans are immunoglobulins. Okay, so we shorten that by saying IG. Okay, so immunoglobulin or IG. We have 5 of them. Immunoglobulin G, A, M, E, and D. Okay, immunoglobulin G plays a major role in your immune system. These are the most abundant immunoglobulins. So 80 to 85% of your circulating Pac-Mans in the immunoglobulin family are your IgGs. These cross the placenta barrier. Okay, so the placenta is found in pregnancy, right? So mom's pregnant, baby's growing, there's a placenta. The placenta does a lot of cool stuff for the developing baby, including immune system, allowing immunoglobulins to go from mom to baby. Okay, a very important function, part of that natural immunity. Okay, IgAs, so these particular immunoglobulins are found in body fluids, so body secretions. So saliva, tears, breast milk, mucus. Okay, IgMs, these are very large immunoglobulins. This is important. They're the first antibody produced during the initial response to the antigen. So for example, right now I'm doing COVID testing in my office, and we do IgM and IgG testing. So IgM lets us know if you have it now, because it's the first antibody produced during the initial response to the antigen. And in this very specific example with COVID, I'm testing you for this. So we're testing to see if you have it now. And the way we do that is by measuring the IgMs. Now, after 14 days, it'll go from IgMs and the IgGs will take over. So that's the second test we do, is to test you for IgGs, and this will let us know if you had it. Okay? So in other words, this test is a 2-for-1. So when you come in and I test you, we're doing both IgM and IgG at the same time, because it lets us know if you have it now, or it lets us know if you've had it. So you kind of get a 2-for-1. Okay, IgEs, these are responsible for allergy response and parasites. So they will fight the allergy part of things and parasites. And IgDs assist the B cells Okay, they assist the B cells in fighting the antigens. Okay, the function of the antibodies, which are the Y-shaped proteins, are to fight the bacteria, to fight the viruses. It's a type of phagocytosis, which is the way, kind of like the way Pac-Man eats the bad guys, right? It ingests them and eats them. That's phagocytosis, which means ingestion and destruction of the foreign particle. And it activates the inflammatory response, which means when you activate inflammation, you bring in more Pac-Mans. It's kind of like calling for backup. Okay, your immune system's job is to also neutralize the toxins that can come out of bacteria, because bacteria can release toxins that can enhance their harmful effects. So when this happens, then your immune system says, no problem, I can just bring in more Pac-Mans to take care of that. So that's where your antibodies come in. So the antibodies come in to neutralize the byproducts and all that from bacteria, and to neutralize the viruses. Okay, antibodies play a role in preventing infection. Okay, after you're done with fighting the infection and now you're in your recovery phase, there's different parts of your body that come in to help you recover. All right, so here's the antigen represented by these triangles. There's the Y-shaped antibodies. The antibodies will bind to the antigen, so that's called the antigen-antibody complex. That's where they bind together and they start to destroy it. Okay, your bacteria, or the bacteria cell, same idea. The antibodies come in and bind to the bacteria and start to destroy it. Okay, cell-mediated immunity, remember, is your T cells. Humoral is B, cell-mediated is T cells. They attack the cell directly. Okay, don't worry about this page. All right. any questions or anything about today's material?